Here we've got a Hibbard, Spencer, Bartlett and Company. It's a phantom bevel. Stamp is pretty faint, but it's an OVB, which stands for Our Very Best. Got three nails in there. On this one here, once I get it clamped into the vise, I start from the bottom. I drive it in just a little bit there, and this really just kind of compresses the wood before I drill some holes in there. That way, whenever I do flip it over and start to drive it out from the other side, when it comes out the bottom, it's got more room to expand and open up. I'm really just removing more material this way. Not much, but every little bit helps when you're trying to get something out that's that tight. Flipping it over here, one of the nails actually popped out while I was banging around on it from the other side. Use my chisel, pop a couple loose pieces off, pry up the edges of that nail. Get the two remaining nails there removed. At this point, I'm just going to get the drill bit and drill out that old wedge and just remove as much of that old wooden material as possible before I drive it out. At this point, it comes out pretty easy. There she is. Now, at this point, it weighs 3.44 pounds. The top of this axe, I'm guessing whoever tried to hang this thing had a pretty severe problem with it coming loose while they were using it. So they would probably just pound this thing back on from the top with some form of metal hammer of some sort. Like this thing was mushroomed out into the eye and pouring over on the outside of the axe as well. So I'm using my Dremel bit. I've just got a burr bit on there and start on the inside of the eye, really just working it out. I think this took about 15 minutes for both sides. So it's not a ton of work, but this makes a big difference when you're hanging this thing eventually, and also it's just going to look better. Going over to my belt sander here to remove the mushrooming that was on the outside of the axe. Just doing my best to be really careful here not to sand the actual side of the axe. I'm just watching what I'm doing here. This is a 320 grit belt. After I'm kind of happy with the mushrooming removed on the sides, at this point from where this thing has been beat on so hard, the shape on the profile along the top of the axe was off. You could tell it was dented in. So again, I hate removing material from an old axe, but I also want it to look right. So at this point, I'm just kind of got a really slight angle from both sides. I ended up really happy with the way this thing turned out. You'll have to wait to the end to see the way it actually looked, but I think it turned out really good. There was a very, very small amount of mushrooming on the pole of this axe. It didn't take much at all to get that gone. And again, you have to be super careful when you're doing this, especially if you've got an old stamped axe and you want to keep that stamp visible. You can see there's not very many sparks coming off of that. I'm not pressing very hard. There was one little chip in the bit. It was, I would guess, a millimeter. So all I'm doing here is just shaping the bit, get a nice consistent curve on there until it was what I liked, and there we go. I'm pointing out the stamp there. It's super hard to tell on the lighting and the camera here. Now, this is a 320 grit. Showing off my leather, you can tell how long I've used that piece of scrap leather for. It's riddled with holes. At this point, I'm knocking off that surface rust. It looked kind of cool. The dark patina was neat, but I could tell that it was a pretty thick layer of rust on there. I usually will start with the brush, but I kind of did it opposite on this one. I'm being very careful not to go over the stamp on this thing, just kind of working around it. Hit it with some WD-40, wipe that off. Now we're going to douse it in WD-40. I'm going to take that stiff wire brush and I'm gonna go at this thing for a few minutes until it, is as clean as I think it can be before I wipe it off, and then we're gonna do the same thing on the other side. Once it's flipped over, get a fresh sanding pad here. I don't have to be as careful on this side with there not being any stamps or markings, but again, I don't want to remove any material that I don't have to, so that's why I'm not hitting this with some sort of heavy grit like a 60 or 80. Again with the wire brush, just to try to get into some of those pits. The sanding disc is great for the surface stuff, but there's pits and you'll be able to tell when you kind of look at it, it's still got quite a bit on there. But it looks a lot better. At this point, we're down to 3.42 pounds. Going to the wire wheel, start with the pole, and I think I work around the top and bottom before I get to the cheeks. This wire wheel gets into those pits and really cleans the rust out of there. I'm sure I could have spent a lot more time with the wire brush in my hand, but the wheel just makes a lot faster work of it, so depends on how patient you are. There she is. On this one here, I'm just using some Birchwood Casey's bluing liquid here. I think it's their super blue. Darken this thing up, hit it both sides, top, bottom. Really like the way it looks. You'll see when we're done how this turns out, but it's a good look if you've got something that's kind of pitted. You don't want to remove a ton of material. You can use the bluing compound. Now this is an 800 grit pad. Doesn't really remove much at all. All it's doing is taking that bluing off of the very top layer. So all those pits will still be nice and dark. The stamp will be nice and dark, but you'll get a little bit of the shine from the metal that's at the top. Even with that 800 grit, I'm very careful when I'm sanding around that stamp. I don't want to go over it, if at all. Now I'm just soaking it with some WD-40, cleaning it up. Fresh rag, wipe that down. Now we're going to sharpen it. Starting here with 120 grit. Got my bucket of water there to my left. Can't express how important it is to keep that edge cool while you're sharpening, especially if you've got a fast moving belt like that. You will ruin the temper quicker than you expect to. I've definitely ruined a few in my day. I've been cleaning these axes up now for about 4 years, and it's funny to look at some of the ones that I did in the very beginning. It's just as fun as it was then, but it's kind of funny, the stuff that you try and learn by your mistakes. At this point, I'm going to a 320 grit from the 120. Just trying to keep that same angle consistent. I don't go more than one back and forth pass without putting it in water to cool that thing off. It's crucial. this point I'm going to an 800 grit, trying to find the right belt. The last one here is a 1000 grit. Now it's got a pretty nice shine on there, pretty sharp, you can feel the burr. Got some blue compound, I put it on the buffing wheel here. First two go-bys here, real hard presses, and I'm really not pressing on the edge. It's mostly just above the edge. And this is for the polishing effect. Once I get the shine that I like, you can see here now I'm working that burr off. And I gotta grab a piece of paper here. It's not perfect, but it definitely, it'll cut paper. So I'm happy with that. Looks really good. Put on the scale, now we're at 3.41 pounds. We've got a nice mirrored edge. The stamp looks great. There's that profile at the top that I had to clean up, and couldn't be happier with how it turned out. Stick around for more. Thanks.